Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, TIFF's Senior International Program for Canada, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is India Donaldson, a writer and director whose first feature, Good One, stars Lily Collius as Sam, a teenager on a backpacking trip in the Catskills with her father Chris and his old friend Matt, played by James LeGros and Danny McCarthy. Not much happens, but by the time the trip is over, Sam's whole world will have changed. With excellent performances and a perfectly calibrated sense of tone, Good One wowed audiences at Sundance and Cannes. It opened in US theaters last week and will be on screens across Canada this Friday, August 16th. Don't miss it. India picked Archipelago, the second feature from British writer-director Joanna Hogg following her award-winning debut, Unrelated. It's a drama about a well-to-do family gathering at a resort on the tiny island of Tresco to say goodbye to one of their own, Edward, played by Tom Hiddleston, as he prepares to depart for Africa to work on HIV education and prevention. But nothing goes as easily as it ought to, because nothing is ever easy in a family as repressed and unhappy as the one we're watching. And it's kind of Joanna's specialty, so I'm really glad we get to talk about it. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Well, I mean, I've said this already, but I'm a huge fan of all of her work. And I mean, the first film of hers that I saw was actually Exhibition. My husband was in grad school at the time, getting his MFA, and one of his teachers was Liam Gillick, who's in that film. And Sebastian, my husband, said to me, he's like, my teacher's in this movie, we should watch it. And I was not familiar with her work yet, and we watched it, and it took me a couple days to process just how much it affected me, but I don't think I had started making movies yet, but felt this like very deep and present need and desire to make stuff. And there was something about that movie that kind of unlocked that feeling for me. And, it's all of her work, but that movie is so, precise and masterful, but also kind of reflected back to me. I don't know, sort of gave me this sort of sense of permission, like, oh my God, you can make a movie that is exactly what you want it to be, and it will speak to somebody. And I actually it's in my Google Drive. I wrote this letter to her, which I never sent after watching that movie, which I'm maybe too embarrassed to even go back and read, but it definitely, I guess, was inspiring. And then I went and watched everything that she had made up until that point. And Archipelago, I mean, I love them all. And actually revisited Unrelated a lot leading up to shooting Good One. I think in part because first films were sort of fascinating to me at the time, thinking about, just the specificity of making your first work. I was, reflecting on that. But Archipelago, there's something about that movie that, to me, it draws it for me. I'll speak about myself. It draws me in this way where I feel like it forces me to look closer. And I feel like there's two types of movies I can watch over and over again. It's like movies that kind of carry you along for a ride and you're sort of cozy in this, protective sort of journey that you're on with a filmmaker, and films like Archipelago that sort of require you to do some work in a good way, to sort of read and interpret the relationship and the history, all of these things that you're not going to get explicitly, and it's all the more satisfying because of it. So yeah, there's just the restraint of it, I guess. And I guess that ties into the characters too. But anyway, I could if you don't start talking, I'll keep talking.
I'm just going to jump in with the thing that always sounds like bragging, as I warned you before we started. I know Joanna a tiny bit, just a little bit. I was on the jury at the London Film Festival that gave her the Frapesci Prize in 2007 for Unrelated. And I've said this, I don't think I've talked about it on a podcast before, but I've written about it once or twice. It was the last movie we saw after on like 9 days. It was maybe, I can't remember how many films we saw, but there were a lot. I think there was something like 22 to choose from. Oh, wow. And it played in this tiny little hidden screening room that they have in the South Bank Center, which I don't think I'm allowed to tell people where it is, but it's in plain sight. So it's remarkable. It's like this space on the ground floor that is a movie theater, a tiny movie theater with maybe 20 seats.
Oh, wow.
We were just sort of ushered in. It was a last minute thing. I don't know why it ended up screening for us the way it had, because I think it might have, it was because our voting deadline was that day and the screening wasn't until the evening. So we were just sort of like, here, this is the local film. This is the English movie. Please come in and give it a shot. And, it's 82 minutes or something. And we just sat there in absolute silence, got out, walked to the bar. Each of us ordered a drink. And it's just like, that's the winner, right? Like, that's the best thing we've seen.
Wow. Oh, my God.
And it was utterly unanimous. Like, there was no debate. And it was a good year. We saw some good stuff. But, and because of our jury foreman having stage fright, I ended up presenting the award on announcing it on stage at the Cineplex Leicester Square or some like giant theater, and Joanna was there, and we got to meet, and we just chatted for a little bit, and then we sort of just stayed in touch off and on over the last 16, 17 years.
Oh, wow.
The first time I actually saw her again in person was when she was back at TIFF with The Eternal Daughter in 2022, 2 years ago. And she is just an exceptional, as you say, like there's no one else who does the things she does. Other people have tried. Like Goodwin is different. I don't want to make it sound like you're both speaking the same language, and I absolutely understand why Archipelago resonates with you and why all of them do. They're about the unsaid things, but hers are so specifically British, right? They're so specifically English about people doing everything they can to refuse to engage with emotion, to avoid the thing they're talking about. And it is so powerful. And in Archipelago, it expresses itself as irritation and frustration with everyone else. Like, why won't you say the thing you need to say? Why won't you tell us what table you want to sit at? All of these things coming from people who will also not communicate. And so you watch this sort of horrible feedback loop of people who ought to be able to speak to each other frankly and intimately. They are each other's family. They are each other's most important people. And they can't do it. And it almost feels like a dissection, like a specimen or some sort of weird test case. There's a Haneke vibe to Archipelago that isn't in any of her other films.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah.
But it's so uniquely her too, because if you've seen Unrelated, this is so clearly a companion piece. I'm actually curious, which order did you see the other two films in?
I saw Exhibition first, and then Unrelated, and then Archipelago.
Okay, so then it would have been even more clear that this is her thing.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, so interesting in relation to Unrelated, the continuation of the collaboration with Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah.
Such a different role, but definitely in conversation with, like his character in Unrelated is so kind of has all the like looseness and joy of youth, and then his character in Exhibition, I'm getting them all, in Archipelago, he's just at that next phase in life, and settling into the family, these like deeply rooted family dynamics that you just can't escape. I mean, I love the presence of the off-screen father.
Right.
Just he looms. He's so present in the whole film, and do you even hear his voice? It's you hear him through the impressions.
It's such a clear portrait of people who don't see each other that I think about it. Honestly, I think about it whenever I'm watching a family have an argument, whether it's mine or someone else's, and trying to figure out who I am in that situation. Like, is this my place? Should I be able to, can I step in and point out what people are saying? And that's rude. And then again, that's how these people are failing each other, by not acknowledging things. So maybe she hears conversations, and the way she works too, like mostly improvising and letting her actors find the tension. But for the dinner table scene, for the restaurant scene that I mentioned earlier, they didn't know that was going to happen. The only person who knew.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know.
So did the actor who plays Cynthia knew?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Lydia Leonard.
Oh, wow.
Was told, and the only direction, as I understand it, was, you don't like this table. Like, that's it. And I don't know if she chose to keep it going, or that was also part of it, that she would choose more than one option, that she would keep them moving. But it's so incredibly specific and illuminating about her in that moment. And then the further complications with, this isn't cooked. I don't think this is right. Do you want to send it back? No, I want to talk to the chef. This is dangerous. Just everything is an escalation. Everything is about staking ground and being right, or having, perfect is the enemy of the good. You can never have the experience that you want exactly. And I think have you seen The Eternal Daughter?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what that film is about, right? Like,
absolutely.
Clearly that this is her thing. And the Souvenir and the Souvenir Part 2 are both about shaping your experience into something that serves you, or learning how to survive something by remembering it in a way, or recreating it in a way that you can control. So much of Joanna's cinema is about the inability to create happiness, right? It's all about, let this happen and you'll be okay, but no one can.
Yeah. There's something very, very horrifying about watching somebody try in ways that are indirect. I mean, the definition of passive aggression, I guess. But I mean, that dinner scene is, I think, a masterpiece, and so hard. I mean, harder to watch than, the most like intense thriller. I think in part because the chef serves as this like audience conduit throughout the whole movie, where you can sort of like feel her discomfort bearing witness to it all. Just her face, like when she chooses to cut to a slightly closer up frame of her, just saying nothing, just taking it in. It really hits hard. Oh, the other dinner. I mean, there's all of the dinner scenes are amazing in this movie, but the one where like the fight between, it's like one of the most direct the conversation ever gets, where he finally says, it sort of airs his grievance that his girlfriend was not allowed to come along for the trip. And they're arguing, but in these hushed tones, not making eye contact. And then Cynthia can only really express her pain through this, when she bites on the piece of metal in the pheasant, she can only express, you just feel that character's like intense need for her pain to be seen, but total inability to ask for what she needs or really even express it. It's like all she can say is, it really hurts. It really hurts.
Yeah. Everybody needs validation. Edward is, I think, only doing this trip to feel like he's doing the right thing, I think. I mean, he may well want to, but it's also as much a gesture to his family of, look how good I am. Look how noble I am.
Absolutely. Yeah. The sense of duty in all regards. Seems like, he can't locate himself in that.
Yeah. And it's a credit to Hiddleston too, that the guy is still likable, even though he's,
oh my God. Yeah. Amazing.
Which again is something that Joanna Hogg sees in him, or maybe saw in him first, that is such a natural part of him. And I truly, I mean, I know he'd already been doing television work, and I think Brenna had already cast him in
interesting.
in Wallander before he shot Unrelated, or he shot it just before he was cast. I'm always fuzzy on that. But there's something that Joanna captures that other directors didn't right away, at least, which is that he is so sly as an actor
Yes.
that he can inhabit a space and keep you guessing.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, it's even as the estate agent in Exhibition for like 2 seconds,
Oh yeah,
he
I
comes
know.
off as this absolutely charming mercenary who doesn't really care as long as he gets this sale sold. He's just done. He doesn't want to
Absolutely.
be there. And you go out going, I want to watch a movie about him. I want to follow him and see what else is going on because I'm sure he's happier than these people. And then, of course, you realize, no, nobody's happy in these movies. That's the whole point.
Exactly. And all of her supporting characters always have that quality to them, I think, where you would happily follow them for 90 minutes as well.
Yeah, and she uses non-professionals. She trusts people to know their thing.
Mhm.
Christopher and the proper chef, the chef,
Oh
are
yeah.
Christopher Baker and Alan Mark Hewitt, who are real life painters and chefs. They're just doing their thing.
It's so beautiful when the two can be, professional actors and non-professional actors can feel so organically in of the same world. I don't think many people do it as well as she does. I love the two scenes, the where the chef is sourcing food, getting the lobster and getting the
Right.
pheasant. Just these, we're allowing us to like sit with this description and um, it's just, yeah, feels very generous in a way, like this is important. I'm going to let you watch it.
Yeah, and then the allows the metaphor of the lobsters to become really, really obvious in the scene she has with Edward, which is like the spine of the trailer, which I'd never seen until this week when I went back and
Oh,
watched it.
interesting. Oh, I'm going to watch it now.
It's just structured around that speech about how, they go into a coma and then they die. It's very
Mm,
peaceful. I don't know why I'm telling you that because you're a vegetarian, and all
yeah.
these little small assertions of professionalism and
Mm,
care that ultimately are
mhm,
still resulting in the deaths of these creatures, which is all he
mhm.
can see. And it's not
Yes.
like he's not pulling that out at her to make her feel bad. She's
Hmm.
explaining the process to make him feel better,
Hmm.
and they're still not getting what they want. Like nobody gets what they want.
Absolutely. Yeah, that the metaphor really hit me watching it this time, I think. Just how, yeah, it was sort of a perfect encapsulation of what the whole film does, I think, how it works.
Yeah. And how all of her cinema works too, because we're the
Mm.
lobsters. Like it's not her
Oh yeah,
characters.
absolutely. Yes, we are the lobsters. I'll happily be Joanna Hogg's lobster. But also, the pot boiling visual, I think, that the sort of the feeling of, when you put water on to boil and the top's on, you go away and you forget about it and then it boils over and you have to rush back. I feel like her films do that as well. Like the sudden, like the off-screen explosions of emotion
Mm.
where, she doesn't, you're not with the character, and it's like she almost needs to give them the privacy to do it away
Yeah.
from our gaze. And it, it's inevitable, but you don't know, how it's going to come about. I just think yeah, it's so true. I think we as human beings, we do so much to keep it together, emotionally, especially around family. But yeah, the pot boils over always.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about A24's 4K release of The Zone of Interest and Via Vision's exquisite Martin Scorsese Films of Faith box, as well as Warner's latest 4K release of the Rocky movies. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. I'm thinking about the fact that we don't see the conversation. We never really find out what it was. It's probably almost certainly a fight that is the reason someone shows up alone in Unrelated.
Mm-hmm.
just entirely adrift and falls between these two groups of people, without an anchor, without anyone to put her back into balance. And in this, there are people who simply aren't present, like again, like the absent father who's around but just doesn't want to be involved, which is so weird and very, very English. Like presumably somebody said something he didn't like an hour before this all started, and now he's sulking for the whole weekend.
Yes.
Or there's a moment in Souvenir Part 2 with a cup that falls and breaks. And that cup sits there on the mantelpiece in the wrong place, waiting to fall. And I honestly, we know what this is going to sound weird to people who haven't seen it, but by the time that happens, we know the provenance of the cup. We know why it's important to characters. We know exactly why it's going to fall at some point. And it is, that's the Haneke thing. She can draw out this tiny coil of horror. Because ultimately all it is that something falls and breaks.
Right.
But it is...
It means so much.
It's a crescendo for both for the characters and for us by the time it happens, because that's how steeped we are in the worlds that she builds. And people do that as filmmakers. Like, that is cinema. That's how that works. But, there's a reason that Scorsese loves her stuff. There's a reason that Powell and Pressburger are her touchstones sometimes, just as they are with him. The Eternal Daughter leans so much on something like... I Know Where I'm Going, or Canterbury Tale. They're just these stories about people who are lost in themselves and the webs that they've built around themselves that keep them from reconnecting. And then when there is hope, it's like we share it. We want them to win. Like, nobody hates her characters, I don't think. We don't. You don't come out going, "Oh, that guy was a dick," or I really hope that person just never talks to her family again. I want all of these people to be okay.
Yeah, I think she has too much compassion for her characters to let her audience truly despise them. I think if you dislike one of her characters, it's for your own, your own reasons, whatever you're bringing to the viewing process. But there's so much, I think there's a lot of empathy she has for people, no matter how repressed they are.
Yeah. She wants them to get better, I think. Even
absolutely.
The device of the Eternal Daughter is ultimately therapeutic, I think, even though it's just utterly shattering.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and she allows them, moments of catharsis too, that I think point to, not things aren't going to change overnight. This family unit will probably, they'll probably still have these same patterns of behavior, but maybe over time they'll wriggle out of these, ways of being that don't serve them. Like, maybe they'll go to therapy and can be a little bit more open with each other. I don't know. There's some glimmer of hope there, I think.
Yeah. The thing I've never asked her about, which I should do someday, is the way that she chooses, especially in her early films, to surround her characters with beauty.
I know. I was thinking about how, Archipelago and Unrelated are both vacation movies, which is an interesting to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And even Exhibition, they're artists, so there's art everywhere. And that sort of extends through the Souvenir and the
beautiful.
Sequel.
It's an expression of who they are. Yeah.
Yeah. You see people with the trappings of comfort and happiness, like they should be enjoying themselves more. And I think that's sort of the run of all of her cinema. And it boils down to, like, why aren't you happier? Which I think is the question that the characters want to ask each other and never do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the sort of function of privilege too, which she's mining that over and over again with all of these films. Like, you have all of the comforts in the world, like, and why can't you be happy?
Yeah, it's the lack of self-awareness or an overabundance of it, I suppose. In either case, that just traps people.
The sound, I mean, I was watching it with probably not great sound on my laptop, but the sound in Archipelago really struck me this time. Like, it's so it's simultaneously gentle and totally jarring. Like it's doing both things at the same time. These kind of hushed voices and birds chirping and wind through trees, and then these hard cuts that sort of jolt you from scene to scene. Just really the tension between those two things, I think, is so subtle but intense, you know.
Yeah, it's an incredibly complex uh, aesthetic, I suppose, for a second feature. But she was doing it with Unrelated as well. But then the other thing that everybody always forgets, I guess, she didn't make her first feature until she was in her 40s. Like she'd worked in commercial cinema
Yeah.
and music videos and done all this. It's not eccentric work, but it's just non-auteur work, I suppose you could sort of say. And when you do that, I think people who work in commercial cinema and even in television, they learn so much more about the technical side that if they haven't made a feature, it all seeps in. And so you end up with this incredibly sophisticated approach when you shoot your shot, when you realize this is the time you make your movie. And Unrelated is shot in this sort of midpoint digital video where it's HD, but it's not proper.
It's such a cool sort of product of its time visually in that way.
Yeah, but it also now works as a time capsule, right? Like it hasn't dated. It doesn't look as bad as some of those other films that were shot with early video ultimately now look, because now it looks like somebody's vacation. It has the haze of memory.
There's something seductive about that, I think, for sure.
Yeah. And this is my really, really awkward segue into Good One, where you shoot something that will be a memory, but you're framing it in a way that's almost clinical as well. Like we need to see what she sees as it's happening, so we understand the memories she forms are going to be important. That the way she perceives it and the way she's experiencing things, the film is unambiguous about an incredibly ambiguous thing. And that is also something that Hogg cinema is. And that, so when you pick Archipelago, it's like, oh God, of course. You're like, there's a continuum here. But again, you're doing it in a completely different way, in a different mode. It's just a vibe that seems to connect the two.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think about her work a lot. I mean, I think about her work constantly. I think in part because my discovery of it, I think, you know, gave me this sense of permission to mine the things that I am fascinated by, and, you know, feeling this sort of trust that anything can be interesting if you care about it. And, you know, I think her movies are very funny, and I find myself kind of laughing and cringing at the same time. And, you know, that was something I thought a lot about in writing this script, you know, how just some of the most uncomfortable moments, you know, can be funny too. And that with hindsight, you know, it's easier to see that. And yeah, just sort of having an unromantic view of teenage girlhood. You know, I think that was my way in to this story. Like I wasn't clinical is a great word. I love that you used it, because, you know, I wanted to be both kind of with Sam and with her perspective, but also kind of take a step back and just observe these people in this place for this time, you know, without telling the audience, or without telegraphing, you know, to the audience too much, I guess.
Yeah. And without telling too much to the listener, your use of James LeGros, I don't know how to explain it without blowing so much about this movie, but you're watching someone, it's like a performance of competence that the character is giving. Like Chris is, I couldn't tell if he was showing off for Matt or trying to reassure Sam, or something in between, or some mixture of them. But then gradually it's just like, no, I know who this person is. It's me when I'm overmatched. Like it's the idea that you can bluff your way through something you don't fully understand and absolutely cannot control. But it's just this sense that he's in the natural world. He's done this a million times. He thinks. And I thought at first, it's like, no, it's not that he's not capable, but I'm seeing Sam figure out he's not as capable as he says he is. And this is like, clearly, this is the first time she's seen that. And it sets up the ending, the last few minutes, to be even more crushing when it goes from, oh, he's not as capable as I think as I want him to be, to he's not the person I need him to be, which is just, again, the journey that we are on. And I hate using the word journey, but they're literally wandering around in a,
it is a journey.
It is a journey. But we're accompanying them and just watching this guy get smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's something I've never seen from Legros. And it's so great that you found it. Like, is it difficult when you're working with a character actor, because the audience's expectations of this guy are always going to be built into everything else we've seen him in? And with, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Lily Coleus, she's new. We don't know her. We can imprint on her. We can use her as a template, or we can just watch her and be fascinated by this new person on the screen. But Legros, it's like, what, 35 years of movies I've seen him in. I think we're almost the same age, and I've grown up with him, or he's grown up with me, or however you want to put it. And this is a new color. Like, you found a new gear for him. So is that difficult when you're working with somebody who kind of does what he does, to convince him to go there?
Gosh, I didn't find it difficult. I mean, the hardest part, I think, was just getting him the script, and getting him to trust. I was a first-time filmmaker. We were a small film. I think somebody who has that much experience behind them has seen everything under the sun in terms of independent filmmaking. He knows exactly what the challenges are going to be. He knows what we're going to be up against, like holistically, for the film, not just his part in it. And he's thinking like that. But thankfully he did say yes to us, and trust that it would be not a horrible experience. And I found it it was just like having the gift of having this incredibly versatile actor just do his thing, and not his thing in the sense that we've seen him, like you said, do it a million times before, but just do his thing as an actor, which is just be the guy, and behave like the guy, and have a very lovely, authentic relationship with this young actor playing his daughter off screen and on screen.
Oh, good.
I mean, just really was really moving to watch that develop. I hope they, stay friends for life, because I think they really had a really, authentic connection as people. And, when I was hoping that he would play this part, I was thinking about him in two movies, Certain Women and Support the Girls. And he plays very different characters, but it was sort of the combination of those two roles where I could see Chris. And I don't know. I mean, I think James is capable of anything. And, above all, I'd seen him. I was actually laughing when I was thinking about like all these movies that he's in that I love, like Certain Women, Support the Girls, like, girls in the title of the movie. And then he'd worked with so many female filmmakers, and I just sort of, I don't know, just grateful that he would do it with us, because I think he could do anything.
I mean, you Hiddlestoned him, right? Like, you found something that no one else had seen. And it's funny, Reichardt comes up in my head a lot of times when I think about Hogg's movies too. They both have a certain, it's not detachment because they're both incredibly empathetic filmmakers, but there is a distance in the visual that lets us see things slightly differently than maybe another filmmaker might have gone with. And there's some of that in Good One as well, just because you're dealing with wilderness and you want to show us the canvas, I'd assumed. But it's just this really interesting mode of observation that, I don't know, I rarely see it done with stillness. When I think of it, it's like they're the over-the-shoulder walking shot that the Dardennes perfected and that everyone else has been doing ever since. But there is something else to be gained by just letting the audience acclimate, like just plopping us down and letting us watch people go about things, which is something that I think your film has in common with those. That just
thank you. I mean, I think that's you've hit on what I love. What I love so much about both of those filmmakers. I think they're very, very different, and yeah, like you said, I think there's a lot of overlap. I think there's a lot of humor in both of their work in really sly ways that isn't always spoken about. But yeah, a lot of shared DNA there that I am constantly inspired by.
That's great. And this does actually get us, because I've got an eye on the clock, to the closing question of the podcast, which is always the same, which is there something specifically of Archipelago, but non-specifically from Hogg's other films, that you have like actively borrowed or homaged or full-on stolen, lifted for your own work?
Gosh, probably many things. There's a shot in, I mean, yeah, if I sat with this question, I could probably give you a long list, but there's a shot in Unrelated that I think is like used often for the poster, but there's kind of three people in the frame. And I remember specifically talking about that image with Wilson Cameron, who shot Good One, just, to pose this thing of leading up to our shoot of like, let's always just consider where these three people are in the frame and in relation to each other. And remember, because I think both of us we're drawn to faces, we like to be close up, but just remembering and reminding ourselves to step back and just observe and have the confidence to not always feel like we have to move the camera and let things, play out for longer periods of time. Let silence be okay. So many things. I'm grateful to her.
My thanks to India Donaldson, whose excellent first feature, Good One, opens in theaters across Canada this Friday, August 16th. It's playing in US theaters right now. Thanks also to Laura Steen. She knows what she did. You can find India on Instagram at India A. Donaldson, all one word, and you can find Archipelago on DVD from Kino Lorber. There's also a Region 2 release from Artificial Eye with commentary from Joanna and Jason Wood, so if you have a Region Free player, you should get that one. It's also streaming for free on Hoopla in North America. All you need is a library card. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you next week.